Hello, friends and fellow neighbors, and welcome back to another edition of Live Like Fred. As always, I'm Colton the Bias, and I'm standing here at the Tin and Lizzie restaurant in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, the hometown of Mr. Rogers, as I am standing here with Chris Rodell, who is the author of the recently published book, Growing Up in the Real Mr. Rogers Neighborhood, Life Lessons from the Heart of Latrobe, Pennsylvania. Chris, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to be with us today.
My pleasure, Colton. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So, what inspired you exactly to write the book, Chris?
Well, it was a commercial idea because that movie was coming out, and I said that having Tom Hanks cast as Mr. Rogers was such a great opportunity, and it was the best casting since 1939 when they had a dog named Toto play a dog named Toto. And so I thought I could do a story about how people live in Latrobe and the influence Mr. Rogers had on the town.
What were some of the focal points that you wanted to focus on when you were writing the book?
Kind of the uniqueness of the town and how it influenced Mr. Rogers. It's a blue-collar town, but it has a heart of gold. And I think that I wanted to tell people that, that there's colorful people here and they can influence you and you can influence them.
So, Chris, in a video that you did a few months ago, like right after the book was published, you mentioned that we all should be weird like Fred, and I got a good laugh out of that when I first heard it because it's almost like the same of what we're trying to do with Live Like Fred. So do you think you could maybe elaborate on that and how you came up with that?
Well, I had a friend of mine that ran into Fred Rogers. The friend was having a terrible day. He had to go to the dentist, and it was in a part of Pittsburgh that was construction was everywhere. The weather was terrible. And he just wanted to be left alone. It was one of these days that he didn't want any human contact. We've all had days like that. And he wanted to wallow in his misery. And the person he ran into on the sidewalk was Fred Rogers. And Fred Rogers did everything he could to cheer him up and just knew he was having a bad day and just tried to bring him out of his funk. And my friend said, if it had been anybody but Fred Rogers, it would have been really, really weird. And I said, we need to get to a point where being really, really nice is really, really normal. And that's what living like Fred's all about.
So, what was the impact that Mr. Rogers had on the city of Latrobe? Because it seems like with the story that you just spoke, and even just in Western Pennsylvania, it was a big one.
Yeah, I think it's something, we see him on our poles and on the statue in town, and it's just a reminder to be kind and to help one another.
That is really a great thing to hear, too. So now, when you think of Latrobe, Pennsylvania, I think you think of Mr. Rogers, but not only do you think of Mr. Rogers, you also think of the golf legend Arnold Palmer, and you are also an author of a book about Mr. Palmer as well here. So when people think of Arnold Palmer, he was respected, he was such a kind person, and he lived like Fred in his own life. So how do you think Arnold Palmer lived like Fred?
Arnold Palmer was one of the most exuberant human beings I've ever known and could ever imagine. He just lived on his terms. He was a very colorful person. The thing I liked about him, he died, he was worth $750 million, but he lived like every single person could live. He was charitable, he was funny, he was stylish, he was competitive without being bitter, and we need a lot more of that these days, but he was just a lot of fun. He really enjoyed his life.
Now, switching gears a little bit, what does living like Fred mean to you?
The great quote I ask people all the time, I say a lot of people now go around saying Sun Tzu quotes, the author of Art of War. And people like to say that they know Sun Tzu quotes, particularly a lot of our leaders these days. And I say that the Fred quote, all you need is one Fred quote. The keys to success, the three keys are to number one, be kind, number two, be kind, and number three, help me out. How's the third one go?
I think it's to be kind. I'm not sure.
But that's the only quote you need, and that is living like Fred.
Now, what makes a snappy new day for Chris? If you want me to elaborate on that a little bit, it's just like what makes a happy, feel-good day for you?
Time with the family and then time with friends. I enjoy coming to the Tin Lizzie. It's such an interesting building, and I'm a lucky man. I get to write for a living, and I just get to enjoy sharing my thoughts with other people. Like I consider myself like a philosopher. Nobody ever told Plato or Socrates, when are you going to get a real job? And so that's kind of my fate in life, is to be an unpaid philosopher.
Chris, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. If you have not gotten your copy of Growing Up in the Real Mr. Rogers Neighborhood, Life Lessons from the Heart of Latrobe, Pennsylvania, make sure to get your copy. And where can people look to buy the book, Chris?
Barnes & Noble has them. It's on Amazon, and the Tin Lizzy has them for sale.
Alrighty, well, thank you so much for your time, Chris. And for Live Like Fred, I'm Colton the Bias. We hope to see you in the near future for our next Inspiring Neighbor.